The United States is marking the 10th anniversary of September 11 attacks. 10 years ago, 4 hijacked commercial airliners descended into the Twin Towers in New York, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the attacks. Commemorations are expected to take place in the 3 locations, and President Barack Obama is expected to visit the sites on Sunday. U.S. officials blame the Al-Qaeda for the 9/11 attacks. However, many still question the official line on what exactly happened on this day 10 years ago. A recently released video showed no evidence of a plane crash near the Pentagon. Last year, the organization, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, called for an investigation by the U.S. Attorney General. Joining me on the line now from Sonoma, California is Roland, online columnist. Thank you for joining us. Many people have doubted the official account of the 9/11 events, like I just announced. What do you think the U.S. government has failed to come up with convincing counter-arguments?
Well, by the way, it's Roland, and thank you again for having me on your show.
Sure.
Right now, it's about 40% of the American people do not believe the official story of 9/11. And the problem is that the 9/11 attack was never treated as a crime. It was treated as a terrorist act. The steel was promptly carted away from the Trade Center, shipped off to Europe, so there was no testing, forensic testing. None, I repeat, none of the airplanes were forensically ever identified. The planes that hit the 2 trade towers and the plane that supposedly hit the Pentagon, which was never filmed. Now it's becoming increasingly apparent that it was a missile. Even Rumsfeld himself, in an off moment on 9/11, said it was a missile. And so I've just written a series of 3 articles on this, 4 actually, in conjunction with Dick Cheney's book, In My Times, Quotes and Lies from Cheney and Neocon Pundits, is that we're looking here at perhaps the greatest, most treasonous act in American history. And my article today was the face of this monstrous lie of 9/11 is Dick Cheney, who was the shadow president at that time. So you've got to take a look at this not as a terrorist attack, but actually as a domestic crime, masked as a terrorist attack. The hijackers showed up 2 weeks later in the Far East. So obviously their identities were stolen, which certainly paints toward a Mossad operation. So this is a carefully planned event that happened, and probably in conjunction with the, how should I put it, in conjunction with the Project for New American Century. That's a think tank that published key papers that would influence American foreign policy from the 1990s to the present day. David Swanson argues that these papers are supported to some degree by both Republicans and Democrats and are characterized by language about absolute dominance and maintaining control of the world. Most of the key players that were involved in this, in some way or other, on the false flag operation of 9/11, were members of PNAC, or the Project for New American Century. As I argued in my article today, the key player, however, was Dick Cheney. And you may ask, why? Because he actually ran the country. Dick Cheney was the shadow president of the United States. The CIA name for Cheney was Egbert Bergman, and for George Bush was Charlie McCarthy. Egbert Bergman was the person who literally was the puppet master. And Dick Cheney had his own intelligence department. Dick Cheney was a key member of PNAC. So the number one unindicted co-conspirator of 9/11 is Dick Cheney. His fingerprints are all over the tainted intelligence for attacking Iraq. He had total control, get this, of NORAD on 9/11. That's
Okay,
the North
Mr.
American
Roland,
defense.
if I may interrupt you here.
Control.
Mr. Roland, you just talked about the invasion of Iraq. This is what happened, Iraq, Afghanistan. What the U.S. has started to do after the 9/11 incident. Do you think this was all, given the all the costs and also the great loss of life on the part of America, do you think this was worth it?
No, of course it was not worth it. It was obviously part of the program. They wanted to attack Iraq. They wanted an excuse. The PNAC, the whole thing was to somehow have another Pearl Harbor so they could basically take control of the government and they could implement their designs. One of the designs was attacking Iraq. Who was behind painting the face of Iraq having weapons of mass destruction? Dick Cheney. Cheney was the strongest advocate for torture and rendition in order to maintain false confessions and also weapons of mass destruction. And this is a neocon operation. It was planned. I'm not saying we totally set it up, but we certainly facilitated it and implemented it and used it. All types. It was carefully planned, though. The Saudi Arabians who were actually shipped out of the country to Bin Laden never was part of this. If the FBI has never put Osama bin Laden, on their wanted list. They knew he had nothing to do with 9/11. This is the biggest bamboozle of all time. The American people got sucked into it. The storyline after the attacks was on the air immediately, put out by neocon people, saying that this had to be bin Laden, etc. The story was planted, and the shadow government, headed by Dick Cheney, went totally into operation. Dick Cheney, by the way, the 9/11 Commission never testified, refused to testify, did not want the 9/11 Commission, and then only agreed to testify with George Bush if it was not under oath and only if they were together. So the real culprit in this whole thing is Dick Cheney. And this has been a carefully planned neocon event in line with the PNAC so that they could what? Take a major step towards control and domination. And we've certainly seen that in Iraq and Afghanistan. And who's in the crosshairs now?
Okay,
Syria,
Mr. Roland, there are
Libya.
a lot of more aspects we can discuss about it, but unfortunately we have run out of time for this. Thank you for your insight. Alan Roland, online columnist, joining us from California.